Today, we're going to be breaking down 3 routes that will get you open every single time. So this first route we're going to be discussing here is from Keenan Allen, and this is going to be like a variation of a return route, but it's a little bit unique in the way he runs it. So we're going to play full speed, and then we'll break it down. So a return route, you guys, is the opposite of a whip route, right? So a whip route is where you're selling like you're running a slant. So you come up, you act like you're running a slant, you break to the inside, and then you whip back out towards the sideline, right? So a return route is where you act like you're going to be running an out route, try to get that DB to crash, and then you return back to the inside. It's literally the exact same thing as a whip. It's just you're going the opposite way. You're going outside back to inside. Now, Keenan Allen runs an interesting variation of it. He almost like fakes the fake return route, if that makes sense. So he comes out, he breaks to the out route, obviously selling like he's running it out, puts the brakes on, drops on his inside foot, and then hooks his outside foot back around. It's very important on a double move like this, you guys, that you get your hips and your shoulders parallel to the line of scrimmage, because that's what's ultimately going to sell it, right? So off of a return route, you guys, we would just break back to the inside, but he puts his inside foot on the brakes on, acting like he's faking the return route and then continuing back to the outside. So he fakes the return route, puts the brakes on with his outside foot, gets that DB to jump, and then goes. Now, again, guys, this does not work if his hips and his shoulders are not committed to that line of scrimmage, or at least flipped around to that line of scrimmage. So anytime that you're running a return route, anytime that you're running a whip route, it is super important that on like, okay, so let's say he's dropping on like his outside foot right now. If you were running a whip route, this would be the same thing as dropping on your inside foot, but he's dropping on his outside foot. That's what obviously starts to slow him down. That's when you want to get low. That's when you're thinking bringing your chin to your knee, dropping to that 90-degree position as violently as you can. But if his outside foot, or excuse me, if his left foot in this case does not flip back around and his toes do not get pointed towards the line of scrimmage, then he's not going to sell anything. If he breaks down and that foot never actually turns, he never actually turns his body, never actually flips his hips, and he's like halfway in, halfway out, that DB's going to be able to read it. It doesn't look like a return route, nor does it look like he's going to be faking the return route. So we have to make sure on a whip route, a return route, whatever, you guys, my hips and my shoulders get back to that line of scrimmage so I can separate and actually sell what I am doing. We have to make these routes look the exact same. We have to make it look like my out route initially. We have to make it look like the return route initially before I throw that fake to be able to get some separation. So I'm going to play at full speed. This is an extremely tough route to guard for a DB because, again, it messes with his head. Could it be a return route? It is a return route, but because he fakes it, because he puts that little extra move on, it gets that DB over anxious to jump, and again, it has to look the same. If you can make your double moves look the same, from a slant and go all the way to this like return route variation, that's going to get you some separation versus any type of man coverage DB. So now this next route we're going to be taking a look here is going to be like, I guess you could say it's just a regular stop route, but it's a variation of a stop route that builds off of a fade versus zone coverage when the DB is like 7 to 8 yards away. So you obviously can't see the DB on the screen right now because he's off in zone, but you will see it once we play this clip full speed. Now, before we play this clip full speed, you guys, if you're a wide receiver or a quarterback and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we're going to be traveling out to 15 different cities across the entire U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. So, guys, check out that very first link in the description below if you're interested. Our first 2 camps in San Francisco and Orlando, Florida are completely sold out. We have no more spots available, but then we'll be coming out to Phoenix, Charlotte, Austin, Las Vegas. All of those camps, you guys, have about 5 more spots remaining, so make sure you take advantage of that. Very first link in the description below, because again, those will fill up very, very quick. Then we'll be coming out to Seattle, Chicago, Newark, New Jersey, Birmingham, Alabama, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, again, local to any one of these cities, we'd love to have you out. Check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get back to this video. So remember, guys, whenever we're running routes, like we talked about with the return route, it's about pairing routes together, right? If I'm running a stop route where I'm breaking at 12 yards, coming back to maybe like 10, or maybe I'm just stopping right at 12 yards, I have to make that look as much like my fade as possible, right? Now, everybody knows on routes by selling fade, I obviously mean you want to run fast, you want to run with the same strides, and you want to have a good body language, which means you want to have like a slight forward lean, like you are pulling a speed sled. Because if a DB sees that, he sees you running hard, he sees you running with long strides, and he sees you pulling that sled, he's thinking, okay, maybe he's going deep. But also the moves that you would use on a fade route versus a specific coverage is a more advanced way to sell that you are running a fade. So let's watch what he does here. So he comes off the ball and he uses this like rocker step fake inside to get to the blind spot of the DB, and then he's able to get some separation. So obviously, like, If I have to run a fade versus this coverage, you guys, like true and true zone coverage, he's 7 to 8 yards away. Generally on a fade route, especially when he's outside leverage like this, generally on a fade route, I'm probably not going to take the inside release. I'm not anti taking the inside release on a fade route, especially if you have press coverage in the DB's outside shade. But a lot of times on your fades, it's like a mandatory outside release. You have to get to the outside. So how we would do that if I had to run a fade route is I would run up to him and I would give him some type of move to the inside. So I would give him a hard fake with my outside foot, press off the outside foot to sell like I am going to the inside, like I'm running a post, like I'm running a dig, whatever it is to try to get him to crash, and then I would slip out behind him and try to get over the top of him. This is versus like cover 3 or cover 4 where that DB's in zone. So if I'm running this like stop route, I want to make it look similar. I want to make it look exactly like how I would run my fade. So this move right here is called a rocker step. A rocker step is where you step in the direction you're going first, and then you fake in the opposite direction. So if I'm trying to run to the outside, I step with my outside foot, press off the outside foot, and fake like I'm going to the inside. So if I have to run this stop route, my goal is to get to this area called the blind spot. I don't want to just take off and try to run to the blind spot because a smart DB might know, okay, that's not how he runs his fade ball. He never just tries to run around me, so I'm going to expect him to put the brakes on. And that's going to make me lose separation. So he does this move to set it up. He comes off 1-2, then he works to the blind spot. DB's over anxious, thinking we're running a fade, especially if we accelerate off of that fake to the inside, and then we could put the brakes down and settle down. So you guys could do this, fellas, really on a comeback. You could do it on a stop route. You do it on a curl route. Hell, you could even do it on a dig route. That might take a little bit of time, but it's a great move to use, or I guess you could say a great route concept to use if you're trying to make that DB really believe that you are running a fade. So great example of that here from Wallace. Let's play this again full speed one more time. Great job using that rocker step to make it look more like a fade, be able to get to that blind spot and get separation on that stop. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at this next route here from Malik Neighbors, and this is going to be kind of like, you could think of it as a slant route or maybe also like some type of option route where you have to put a move on, but I want to discuss this like kind of open field crossover that you guys could really use on, a 5-yard in. You use it on a slant. You could use it on a choice route where you could go inside or outside. You could use it on a dig route. But this crossover is very, very tough to stop at the top of the break, especially on short routes if you can utilize the concept of having sudden feet and more so stepping down with the first step of your crossover, okay? So we're going to play it full speed, then I'll explain what I mean there. So he comes up, hits him with this 1-2, gets that DB to jump, and then obviously able to catch that ball with some ton of separation. So a crossover move, you guys, is like a 1-2. It's like that rocker step that we were talking about. You step in the direction that you were going first. So Neighbors is going to the inside. So he steps with his inside foot first. Then you fake like we were going to the outside to get that DB to jump outside. And then I got separation back inside. It's simple concept, you guys. But something that might help you get a little bit more explosion with that crossover is thinking about stepping down with your inside foot. So notice how he's doing a 2-step. He's doing this crossover, but notice how the first step isn't this like really big, over-exaggerated step, because that first step is not the most important step. A lot of guys, what they'll do is when they take this crossover step, they take this really big one and then this really big second step. But the problem is that your second step is not selling anything because you're not actually pushing and generating explosion off of your first step. So what Neighbors does a great job of is the concept of stepping down with your first step. So he steps down. And when you could step down and you're sudden with that step, what that does is that creates explosion. So now what that explosion allows you to do, because now your foot's inside your shoulder frame. If your foot is outside of your shoulder frame over here, it is very hard to push off of it because your feet are too wide. You're not going to get any explosion. But if you step down inside that shoulder frame and you push off of that like middle arch of your foot, what that helps you do is step further with the crossover step. So that makes this DB think that you're really going to the outside. It allows you to bring your hip with the foot, your upper body with the foot, and that's what helps us sell. Because if a disciplined DB is watching our hips and reading our upper half, my upper half has to go with the step. So it can't just be step, step. It's you step down and you push off of that step so your whole entire body can go with the second step of this crossover. And that's what ultimately gets us separation, you guys, and that's how we could get this type of space. So if you guys can utilize that crossover on like, maybe a quick slant, maybe a 5-yard in, maybe not a quick slant, but maybe a slower developing slant, like maybe an RPO where the quarterback has a little bit longer time, or maybe you're running some type of option route where you could go inside or outside, you could easily use this move. Remember, step down first, push off of that step, and you want to step in the direction we are going first to be able to create that space.